Salut! Today we're going to go over lesson 20. In this lesson, we are going to see the difference between il est and c'est to translate it is, the verb devoir and the verb rester, and also to say something good or nothing good, and finally how to say neither nor, as in I want neither a dress nor a skirt. As you can see, this is going to be a wild ride, so hold on to your chair and download the class notes to follow along. Alright, first we have to see how to use il est or c'est with an adjective. This part will help you translate sentences like it's difficult to read or it's easy to eat. This point is a bit complicated because the use of il est and c'est in French is a bit fluid. And this will also depend on if you're writing or speaking. What I will do today is give you a way that is easy to remember and that will be right almost all the time. Okay, first we need to figure out if it is in English refers to a specific object, meaning something we can point at. If you can point at it, usually we will use il est or elle est if it's feminine, of course, and then the preposition a before the infinitive of a verb. For example, let's say I'm talking about a specific book, imagine a book by Marcel Proust, and you want to say it's difficult to read. Here we will say il est difficile à lire. Now, if we're not talking about a specific object, meaning we're trying to say that it's difficult to read as the concept of reading, because you just got eye surgery, for example, we will use c'est and the preposition de before the infinitive of the verb lire. So our sentence, it's difficult to read, will be c'est difficile de lire. This is the easiest explanation of this rule, and I think you should learn it like that for now. The book goes over other examples where you can switch il est and c'est, and they're not wrong, but using this simple rule I just gave you, you will almost always be right. Here are more examples. This steak, it's difficult to eat, will be ce steak, il est difficile à manger. But if you just got your teeth pulled out and it's hard to eat in general, we will say c'est difficile de manger. Now, there's one little note on this. If your object is stated after the verb, we will revert to the concept c'est and the preposition de. For example, it's difficult to eat this steak will be c'est difficile de manger ce steak. The reason is because the steak is no longer the subject of your sentence. It's clearer if we replace our steak with a person, because in English you use it for things, but he and she for people. Imagine we're talking about a man called Paul. I can say Paul, he is difficult to understand. And it will be in French Paul, il est difficile à comprendre. But if I put Paul at the end of my sentence, we no longer use the subject he for Paul, but it. We would say it's difficult to understand Paul. And likewise in French, we will say c'est difficile de comprendre Paul. Alright, I invite you to check the examples in the book as well. You will see that the book uses il est for concept as well, but I think that it's just confusing to beginners for now. So I'd rather you learn my simple rule here. Okay. Now we need to see the verb devoir and the verb rester. First, the verb devoir will translate the English modal verb must when it means to have to. For example, I must eat can also be said I have to eat. Let's go over how to conjugate the verb devoir in the present and then I'll show you two other uses in French. Repeat after me. Je dois, tu dois, il doit, nous devons, vous devez, ils doivent. Alright, now to translate our previous sentence I must eat, we will say in French je dois manger. This one is pretty straightforward, but it gets a bit more complicated when the verb devoir translates the modal verb should. Devoir will translate should when it can be replaced by is supposed to. For example, my brother should arrive in 10 minutes can also be said, my brother is supposed to arrive in 10 minutes. Here we will use the verb devoir and we would say Mon frère doit arriver dans 10 minutes. Now, one little note on this, usually we would use the conditional of the verb devoir, but here I want you to focus on knowing when we use the verb devoir, so that's why our example is using the indicative present. Okay, there's one more use of the verb devoir, and it's when it means to owe, as in I owe you 2 videos on French movies. This one is pretty simple, but I want you to remember that the verb to owe takes a direct object for what you owe and an indirect object for whom you owe it to. This means that I owe you 10 bucks. 10 bucks is our direct object and you is our indirect object. Therefore, the sentence I owe her $1 will be in French Je lui dois $1. If this just confused you, please go back to lesson 16 where we covered indirect objects. Alright, now let's dive into the verb rester. The main meaning of the verb rester is to stay, and it is conjugated as follows. Please repeat after me. Je reste, tu restes, il reste, nous restons, vous restez, il reste. Okay, there's one exception for the verb rester where it won't translate the verb to stay very well. And the main example for this is staying at a hotel. But I'll do you one better and help you understand why it doesn't work first. I want you to think of the verb rester as the verb to remain. In French, we will use the verb rester for being in a place when we're physically staying in there, like remaining there. So ask yourself this, will I stay in that place all the time? This is why I'm staying home works with je reste chez moi, because you will stay physically at your place. But this is why I'm staying at the Four Seasons doesn't work, because you're not going to remain at the Four Seasons. At least I hope not. For these cases, in French we use the verb être, so I'm staying at the Four Seasons will be je suis aux 4 saisons. Now it's a bit more complex if you're saying, for example, how long someone is staying. Imagine your parents are visiting for the holidays and you say, they're staying at my place for 2 weeks. Here, they won't be at your place for 2 weeks. That's where they sleep. So we will use in French the verb être and we will say, ils sont chez moi pendant 2 semaines. But if you want to say that your parents are staying in New York for 2 weeks, then it's okay to say ils restent 2 semaines, because they will most likely be in New York for 2 weeks. Does that make sense? At least I hope. Because we're about to see the use of the verb rester that is the most complicated for English speakers. But thinking of the verb to remain will help here again. Alright, one more use of the verb rester is when you're saying that there's a quantity or an amount of something left. The easy explanation is that when you say there's 1 slice left, for example, in French we think of it as it remains 1 slice. So let's try to translate our first sentence, there is 1 slice left. If, as I just said, we think of it as it remains 1 slice, we will say il reste une part. Once you got this concept, you will have to figure out that if you have a subject in there in English, it will become the indirect object pronoun in French. And that's because, for example, if we say she has 1 room left, in French we will think about it like it remains 1 room to her. This is why the sentence she has 1 room left will be in French with the indirect object lui for her, il lui reste une chambre. The il here translates it and not she. Our subject she in English completely vanished because the verb rester here is impersonal. Alright, let me give you 2 more examples so you can see it with different indirect object pronouns. They have 10 rooms left. In French will be il leur reste 10 chambres. We have 2 Coke left. In French will be il nous reste 2 Coca. Hopefully this makes sense now, but if you're still having trouble with this, please don't hesitate to spend a little more time on this particular point in the notes. There are way more examples, and I use bold, italics, and underlining to make the part stand out. Alright, we have 2 more things to cover, but they are way easier, so you can relax a bit. First, we have to see how to say something or nothing and an adjective. This one is pretty straightforward. We will use the word quelque chose for something and rien for nothing, and then the preposition de and an adjective. Therefore, something good is quelque chose de bon, and nothing good is rien de bon. So far, so good. Now, there is one more thing to add to that. If you want to add a verb after that, you will need to use the preposition à. This means that if we say I want something good to eat, we will say je veux quelque chose de bon à manger. Also remember that if you use nothing, it is a negation, so you will need to add the part ne before the verb in a sentence. This is why they have nothing good to eat will be ils n'ont rien de bon à manger. Okay, our final point is how to say neither nor. And this is the easiest thing you will have to learn today, if not ever. I don't often say this, but here just do exactly like in English. Neither and nor are both translated with the word ni. This means that neither yes nor no will be in French ni oui ni non. Now in English, for both the things you don't want, you can use either no article, as in neither fish nor steak, or definite articles, as in neither the fish nor the steak, or demonstrative adjectives, as in neither this fish nor this steak, or possessive adjectives, as in neither my fish nor your steak. Well, just do exactly the same in French. There's no rule to learn here. If it uses an article or an adjective, just use one in French. If it doesn't use any, don't use any in French. The only thing you need to know is that ni and ni are part of a negation. So if you make a sentence like I want neither the fish nor the steak, you will need to add the ne part before the verb. So if that helps, learn it as ne ni ni. Our sentence I want neither the fish nor the steak will therefore be je ne veux ni le poisson ni le steak. Alright, that's it for today. We covered a lot, so don't hesitate to rewatch this video if you need to. And as I mentioned before, sometimes the notes can be a little more visual, so don't hesitate to use them. Also, why don't you show me what you understood by telling me in the comments what you don't eat, for example, as in I eat neither meat nor fish, or maybe you can tell me how many lessons are left using the verb rester, or that it's good to watch these videos. Any comments will be appreciated, and also don't hesitate to ask questions as well if something isn't clear. In the meantime, I hope you're having a great day, and I'll see you on the next one. Au revoir!